Broadcasting live from the Wellness Wonderland, you're listening to the Wellness Wonderland Radio. I'm Katie, and each week I chat with the most inspirational people on the planet on how to stay inspired in all areas of life. As you listen, feel free to tweet at me at Katie Dalebout or use the hashtag Wellness Wonderland. I'd love to hear your aha moments. So grab your headphones and listen on the go, or cuddle up with a notebook as we dive in deep with authentic conversations right here in Wonderland. Welcome to the Wellness Wonderland Radio. I am Katie Dalebout, your host, and today's episode is an amazing one with my friend and nutritionist and amazing human being, and also another podcast host of the amazing podcast Food Psych, Christy Harrison. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you will know that she's a return guest, one of the few. And this is a really fun follow-up conversation to our first conversation. Since then, we've become really great friends, and we actually recorded this podcast many months ago as well. And a big announcement is that I'm going to be going to New York in April, and we're going to be doing a live podcast episode together. So more info and date and time on that to come. Make sure you're on my email list if you're not already. The link to that will be in the show notes, as well as, follow me on social media for updates on everything with that, as well as my book launch and book tour. I'm going to be going to a bunch of different cities, including New York, which is why I'll be there in April, and we'll be able to do the live podcast while I'm in town. And if you want to help out with the book launch, join my Let It Out book ambassadors. And there's still time to get in on that. The link, again, will be in the show notes to that as well. And if you haven't left a review on the podcast on iTunes, that would be fantastic. It helps a ton. So if you could just stop on over to iTunes next time you're on your computer. Got to do it on your computer, can't do it on your phone. I don't know why. They should really make that a capability. Maybe they will soon. And leave a review. It would be super helpful. So thank you guys so much for listening. Tweet me, show me where you're listening. Do you listen while you're taking a bubble bath, or while you're driving, or while you're walking? All of the above? While you're cooking? I don't know. I want to know. So tweet at Christy or myself and send us a message and let us know what you thought of the show. So thank you guys as always for listening, and I will talk to you in the episode.
That I'm anywhere near Lena Dunham's status, but I feel like when I first started my podcast too, I was just starting to like transition into treating eating disorders from a whole other specialty of nutrition. And I kind of was like, I'm so interested in this stuff and it needs to be discussed, and I'm out there doing it. But really, I was not very educated on how to speak about it at first. So I think I kind of made some missteps and, learned as I went along. But it's interesting that she's doing that on this massive scale,
Yeah, no, I know. And, well, by the way, I Pete Homestyled started recording. So
yeah, I love it. I was wondering about that.
Yeah, as I started recording. I wrote down like a million things I want to ask you, but this is interesting because this is one of the things that I wrote down that I wanted to ask you is about, and we've talked about this many times before, and I was going to listen to my first episode with you today to make sure this wasn't repetitive, but I don't even remember, and that was so long ago, so I'm sure it won't be because,
a million years ago.
Yeah, forever ago. And I always say this all the time, but I change so quickly, and I think we all just change so quickly, but I think especially like in your early 20s, you just like change it like this like rapid fire pace where it's just like I don't even remember who I was when I was like a different person then, because we like change so quickly. But anyways, we've talked about this a lot before, and I'm trying to remember if it was on a podcast or just like when you and I have been on the phone, but about that. And you've definitely talked about it on Food Psych, but I don't know if I've talked about it on here too much, but about how when people have eating disorders or are obsessed with their bodies and food and diet and nutrition, and their careers are in this like malleable place, it changes the trajectory of their life and their career. And that was the case for both you and I.
Totally.
And it's crazy. It's just crazy to think about that and how, having this thing that happened to us a long time ago is still part of our life and kind of going to be part of our life for a while, speaking out about it and telling our story about it. And I don't know, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Not so much, that it's this like part of my life that's like so far behind me, because it's not that far, but it's going to get further and further. And will I still be talking about it, or will I still be talking about it in a new way? And then really like getting honest with myself and asking myself, like, yes, I'm so passionate about body positivity and health at every size, and really like promoting these things that are like still very taboo and at least not mainstream.
Totally.
And so I'm definitely passionate about it, but I'm kind of questioning my motives of like, am I so passionate about it because I'm trying to convince myself,
Yeah.
And really like, I don't even want to say that out loud because I don't want that to be the case.
Let that be true. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm sure it's part of it, like I'm sure.
Totally.
Do you think about that? Talk to me. Tell me.
Oh my God, yes, I do. It's interesting too, because I feel like the stuff that I needed the most when I started this podcast, or even when I started my journalism career, writing about food and like decided to become a nutritionist, I think those needs were also coming out of a different place. And now I'm like, if I get an assignment to write something just about like pure food, like write about this chef or this dish, it just feels like, ugh, okay, fine. Like I can do that no, not to denigrate it, but it's wonderful. Good food writing is wonderful, but like, it's just not what I want to do anymore, And so when I get something, related to those things, or like when someone's asking me kind of basic nutrition questions, I'm like, okay, cool. I'll explain some kind of basic things to you or whatever, just totally non-related to disordered eating or anything, but it's not the kind of thing that like sparks my passion. It's like, all right, this is something I know, and this is something that's part of my past, but it's not where my heart lies. And actually, recently I've been doing a lot of soul searching, and I just came back from vacation at the beginning or at the end of last week.
How was
and
it?
It was amazing. It was amazing. We went to Hilton Head, which is like this very very protected, sort of undeveloped island. I mean, there's parts of it that are developed, but a lot of it was protected by the Nature Conservancy, and there's just like marshland and beaches, and it's just gorgeous.
That's
and
amazing.
I made the commitment because it was the first week-long vacation I'd had in more than a year. And I committed to myself I was going to unplug from technology, except for like a few select things that I had to do. So I didn't check my private practice email at all. I put an autoresponder. I had my assistant respond, and that was it. And I barely checked my main like personal email, and I did a few tweets about Food Psych when the podcast went up. But otherwise, I was like out of commission, out of the loop. And it was amazing, and it felt very freeing. And then when I came back, I was like just bowled over by how much I had to do and by how many stimuli I was exposed to on a daily basis, both living in New York and being a part of like the online world. And it just really helps me kind of put some things in perspective and think like, okay, where do I actually want to put my energy, and what is what's pulling my heart right now? And really what's pulling my heart is like, my own stuff, like the podcast and my personal writing, and, maybe reporting on food and nutrition from a health at every size perspective, and keeping that part of my journalism career up, but also personal writing. So I'm like starting to scale back on the things that don't align with that. And I think a large part of why I'm just not feeling those things anymore is because like that's not where, I'm not getting the juice from those anymore, because I've kind of mastered them or something. Like the health at every size stuff and body positivity stuff is maybe something more recent for me, and something I still need to like I don't know if I'm grappling with it, or if I just like recently experienced epiphanies related to it and I'm energized by that, and I'm just like still close enough to it to care. But it's something, more present for me now. And I'm trying to figure out what that is too.
Maybe because it needs more voices. Like maybe because like health and nutrition don't need any more voices. Like we don't need any more health coaches. We don't need any more dietitians. We don't need any more like, it's great and like good for everyone who's doing that. It's all part of their own path, and it'll get them to where it gets them. But there's just that part of green juice health food movement, which I'm like very much a part of, and have been in the past, is like so saturated, and I feel like this other part is just really not saturated, and we need so many voices in it to get it heard, because unfortunately it needs to come through a lot of different frames for it to be listened to. And Linda Bacon spoke about this to us, but she says that like, since she is a thin person, Linda Bacon wrote Health at Every Size. She's coming on my podcast, and she was on Christy's podcast. Maybe she has already come on mine by the time this goes up. But anyway, she was saying that like, she has thin privilege, like she is a thin person, but she is saying that like, that gives her a certain amount of people able to listen to her that wouldn't be able to listen to her because of their societal baggage that they have. So
totally.
Anyways, it's just I think that maybe that's the reason why we're really passionate about this. And then at the same time, I think it's partly what I said too. My friend Simi said to me, like, people, I don't know if this is a quote or it's just she's really wise and she said this quote, but she was like, when people are trying to convince themselves, they get louder. And that just like really hit me, because I think I know a lot of people like that in other things, like not in body image and health at every size, especially in like health and wellness. I think that that's true, and in spirituality, and in like every topipic there is, politics, Totally. I think that's a lot. There's like a lot to be said about that. But anyway, so.
Oh yeah. No, that's so interesting. And that just made me think of something that now totally left my brain. I don't know why.
I know. I did that earlier when you were talking. So I know that Pete Holmes, who's like our podcast guru, has like a piece of like pad of paper.
Oh, yes, a piece of paper.
I have that too. And I've been like writing stuff down right now. And it's been helping me. So
yes, that is so helpful.
Just take notes while we're talking.
I'm going to try to find a pen. Okay, my table is a disaster, but yes.
Yeah, find a pen. This is what I wrote down. So I was saying that when you went on vacation and unplugged like that, that's so amazing and great and wonderful and like good job. But I know that like when you get back, you can feel like so overwhelmed. Is that what happened to you?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was tough because I was like, shit, I hate everything.
Yeah.
Like I just felt such a visceral response and reaction to like, I mean, starting with really the airport. It was like everything leading up to, even like the minute we got into the plane, just things went totally awry. We ended up having to it was supposed to be a direct flight that would take 2 hours, and we left at 7 p.m. and we were supposed to get home at 9 p.m. And then instead we ended up in Orlando and having to, because the crew that was assigned, it was the other way. Yeah. And they had to go back. So the whole thing took like almost 12 hours. There's like massive delays. And I guess the crew that was assigned to our plane wasn't allowed to work more than 9 hours, and they surpassed that while they were delayed. And so they had to get a new crew that hadn't worked too much that day. It was like such a shit show. So, from that moment on, I was like, welcome back to reality,
Yeah. That's
and just, struggling jarring to hold on to that zen too, which is, I've heard, speaking of Pete Holmes, I heard recently Elizabeth Gilbert talking on his podcast about the idea of, meditation retreats and, ashrams and stuff where you go to unplug and disconnect from society. But what the hell is the point of it if you can't take that feeling and that presence into the messy, crazy modern world we live in? You can't just, she didn't want to just, she was saying she didn't want to just live on an ashram forever. It's she wanted to do something with that feeling.
Yeah. And I say that all the time. I say that every week in my yoga class. You can be all zen in here, but the real practice is out there on the street. Yeah. And when you get in the parking lot, when someone cuts you off and you're trying to get to brunch, can you breathe then?
Yeah.
Because doing it on your mat is a practice for out there. And staying in an ashram all day is easy. It's when you have to go to Orlando on your way home from vacation. That's the real stuff. And
yeah.
Yeah. And that's exciting. That like that's why we are in these bodies, like to like use them and experience things. And
Totally. And you know, it was interesting actually. I had such an interesting moment with that experience because when we were so delayed on the plane, like we had eaten a late lunch and we were supposed to be, you know, flying from like 7 to 9 p.m. So we were kind of like, okay, we'll bring a snack and just like eat dinner when we get home. Well, you know, whatever 5 or 6 hours of delay later, we were starving and they didn't actually do food service on the plane. They just had snack service because it was supposed to have been a short flight.
right.
So like I basically just made my dinner of random snacks.
Yeah.
And that's something that like would have totally driven me crazy in my food issue days. You know, I would have obsessed over it. I would have probably you know, tried to work it off when I got home or been too exhausted to work it off when I got home and then beat myself up by binging on more food at home. You know, like there was this like cascade of bad stuff that would have happened. But instead, like I just like sucked it up and, you know, had my snacky dinner and it was actually kind of good. And then like we got home and just passed out, you know?
Yeah.
So it just felt like a real, you know, moment of showing the progress I had made.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that you brought this up because I can relate to this so much. In the past year, I've like eased up so much and have had so many moments like that where it's, yeah, like eating, you know, 2 Kind bars for dinner or like, you know, and for breakfast or like,
Right.
like stuff that I would have just like, that's like a I hope that doesn't sound diety, but that was just like that's not like
Yeah,
a good. This is what I happen to have around or whatever. Like in a pinch, eating things that I just never would have eaten before, or like you said, you know, you're traveling and this and that, and just so many different things like that I've done, and I'm totally cool with it. And then the weird here's the weird thing that happens. I'll be like in bed, you know, thinking about somehow I just like think about it or whatever. Or well, here's the thing, I don't even think about it anymore. But what will happen is like every once in a while, I'll just I'll think about myself and how I've been eating and like what's been going on, and that I will think about what my old self would have thought.
Yeah.
And it'll just be like a quick moment of like I would have flipped out. And then because I do that, I'm like there's like this brief moment of like not even nostalgia really for like who I was then or the discipline I had then, maybe a little bit for like the discipline I had then, like wow, I was so disciplined back then to like make my kale salad every week and do all this stuff and be so dogmatic and like wow, what a disciplined girl that was, you know. But also a crazy freaking like messed up like not fun to be around person, and I remember that and it's fine, but like there is this brief moment of not questioning wanting to like do that again, but just from the perspective of that person being like, oh, she would have found all kinds of things wrong with that snack dinner. You know, she would have judged the heck out of that. But I don't anymore. Wow, how far I've come. Really, I'm just like regurgitating exactly what you said. But
no, but it's such a beautiful moment. And I mean, really, like that same sentiment I've heard so many clients say too when they get to this place of like, it's enough in the rear view mirror that you can be like, you know, attuned to what that former self would have thought, but like grateful that you're not there anymore.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I don't know. It's crazy. I think it just makes you really grateful, I think. Because yeah, it's cool. And I think, okay, here's, oh my gosh, I have so many different directions of things that I want to talk about that I don't even know where to go. But here's something that is coming to my mind right now is that nostalgia of like, not necessarily wanting to go back, but the fact of I was there, and I think I wrote about this in my essay that you read from this week of like, and I think it was a lot longer, like a way longer. I'm very wordy, and like we cut it down a ton. But
it's great though.
Thank you. But I don't know if this is in there or not. I don't actually remember. But I wrote that like I had this feeling. And this is not like so far in the rearview mirror, like this is like pretty recently, but I would struggle with the fact of like all these people that I know, and I think you and I have talked about this a little bit too, Christy, but like a lot of people that I know or people who are never into like health and wellness or into like holistic living or into, you know, controlling their weight through food or any like health stuff, not even really, you know, doing it for the purposes of weight even, but it probably is if they really get honest with themselves, you know? And then all of a sudden, like, they're doing it now, and I'm trying to get off this healthy train or at least take more stops into, like, not being so dogmatic about it, where it seems like everybody and Michelle Obama and Beyonce and like Jay-Z are like vegan and getting onto this train that like I was ahead of the game on back then, and now I've already like gone on that train and gotten off, and so there, and now it's trendy, and I'm like being like the not trendy thing, you know?
Right.
And so there's this moment of like, I want to do what's right, not what's popular, but I also want to make what's right popular, which is I think like why we're having these conversations and why, like, you know, there are starting to be more voices in the like anti-diet movement, you know, and like which is great, and that's what I was saying before. There needs to be a diverse group of voices that, you know, like Linda Bacon's great, but like she's not going to get to perhaps my generation as easily as like I can, or and that's why. And also different body types, like we were saying before. Like there needs to be different body shapes saying the same message. There needs to be different generations. There needs to be different genders. Like there needs to be so many different voices in this, because it's like Mexican food. Everybody, you know, it's like different. People like tacos, people like nachos, people like burritos. But at the end of the day, it's the same stuff, but people like it in different forms, you know?
So that's a really good metaphor.
So it's like they'll all get the same nutrition, the health at every size or whatever, the beans and corn, but some people are going to get it through you, some people through me. So, but anyways, what I struggle with is like that sense of wanting to be part of like the cool kids club with like wellnessy stuff, you know? And I think it might be a little bit different for you because you were kind of in like the foodie community and like into like when you worked at Gourmet and stuff. So I don't know. Talk to me.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting, like because I feel like I was sort of part of, like before I even worked at Gourmet, I worked at an environmental magazine called Plenty, and I did some freelance work for different places. And I, at the time, was still in my eating disorder and was going through, it's so weird that this coincidence happened, but we're both writing personal essays for Refinery 29, like a week apart. Mine's coming out next week, or I mean, obviously by the time this comes out, who knows, it'll probably be out. But,
it's so funny too, because I heard you talking about, sorry to interrupt you, but on the last episode, I heard you talking about that, and I was like working on mine, and you were talking about the comments. And how you were going to have Nate read the comments for you. Yeah. And I was like, I might need to call you and Nate to read the comments for me.
I know, totally. Yeah, I would be happy to be your comment filter if you want. I feel like it's so...
Well, I already read them, so it's
so
too late.
Okay.
We'll talk about that later.
Yes, definitely, we will. So yeah, I mean, I will have spoken or, you know, written about this on that column, but basically I like became really obsessed with gluten before that was even a trend. Like I, in some small way, I think helped start the gluten-free trend. And because I was in my eating disorder and I was looking for solutions to my physical ailments that weren't just like, you need to eat more and you need to gain weight, which, you know, was like not really said to me enough by enough people, but certainly by my mom. She was kind of the one person who like really nailed it. So I was like really pushing back against that and, you know, doing all this research, and gluten just started to feel like this, like, you know, panacea. It was like, oh my gosh, of course I'm sensitive to gluten. That's why I'm, you know, don't have my period and I'm tired all the time and I'm always sad and I have these like uncontrollable binges on wheat-based foods and I'm constipated, you know, just like all these things that of course were, you know, in hindsight and with recovery, I can see were attributed to not eating enough and restricting and binging. But like, you know, in the moment I was refusing to admit that I had an eating disorder. So when I, you know, kind of like first got into journalism, I was doing more like nutrition and health and like that kind of stuff. And then as I recovered, and I think as a big part of my recovery, I moved into like pure foodie writing. And when I took the job at Gourmet, I think it was a huge step ahead because I was surrounded by people who had really good relationships to food. And I like ate with them and saw this, really fun approach to food modeled all around me, and saw that people weren't like just consistently gaining weight, so that I knew I wouldn't either. Or, took a while, but it was helpful reassurance to know that. But so I don't know, my relationship to it is so weird because I feel like I was there like 10 years ago, and then I went away from it when it wasn't even cool. Yeah. And I went away from it, very hardcore, kind of being like, okay, that's not healthy for me. That's not, I can see, and, as the years go by, I can see more and more how detrimental it was to me to be so fixated on wellness and on, specific like elimination diets and stuff like that. So seeing what a trend it is now is like, I almost feel, I don't know. I guess I've always been sort of this way where if I like something and then it becomes cool, I'm like, yeah, that's because I'm the cool one.
Yeah.
and I actually think like we're the cool kids with this health at every size thing. That's what I like, would respond when you say like it's like the wellness stuff is popular now, but popular is not cool. I don't think. Like, this
so
shit is
right.
cool.
Oh my God, that just like changed everything for me. You're so right. Like, when have I ever thought that the actual popular stuff was cool? Like,
right.
Never. It's no one. Yeah. Wow.
Because like, I mean, we've talked about this before, and I know you've shared this on your podcast, but yeah, we've never been like mainstream cool girls. We were like kind of dorky and weird as kids. And I think, to me anyway, that has stayed with me. Like that sense of being like a little bit of an outcast, an outsider, like has partially formed my identity. And now that I'm an adult, actually, I feel like now the culture, it's gotten so blurred what was dorky and what's now cool, because like I think people of like my generation and, like, I don't know, the whatever 35-year-olds now are like a lot of the ones who are the creatives in charge of making a bunch of content that people are consuming. Were like super dorky as kids, like I was, and all this stuff that was really dorky is now cool. So it's like very confusing. But I feel like the people who are really into wellness and making that popular, that's a different thing,
Mm-hmm.
So,
and I think the internet really allows people to like do what they do, like there's a place for everybody. It's like a very inclusive thing, but it can also be very exclusive too. But I think you just have to decide like where you want to be and own it,
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I relate so much to what you said with the gluten thing about how you were like using that as, it's like you want to have your cake and eat it too. It's like, I want to be thin, I want to stay this thin, but I also want to have my period back and clear up my acne and like get to have better energy and like all of that stuff and like poop regularly.
Yes.
And you should actually have her on Food Psych. She's great. But Stephanie Rupert, do you know her?
I've heard of her. Is she the hormonal balance?
Yeah, she wrote this book called Sexy by Nature, and she was like really hardcore in the paleo diet for a while, and then just realized, oh, I have an eating disorder. Whoops. Whoopsies. and yeah, and so she says this too, like she was trying to have her cake and eat it too, like literally just, I want to stay this thin, but also clear up these things. And I started to do that too with the Candida diet. Like I was like, that's everything. I can't have any sugar and this and that and blah, 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 and no fruit and everything's bad. And, and so dogmatic about that for so long. And then, and I don't know if I've told you this, but the thing that really helped me like completely get over my eating disorder is such a funny thing. And like, if I'm ever a comedian someday, like this would make a great, like funny bit of like, I just did all these different, to get over my eating disorder, I did all these different diets. And what I would do is like, I was like really vegan and hardcore about that. And then all of a sudden I was like learned about the paleo diet, and so I was like, oh, I'll be vegan, but I'll take the parts I like about the paleo diet, so I'll like, you know, eat lots of nut butters and whatever, and so I'll like take it, so they're not that merged too. And then I found, but I wasn't really eating carbs. That was like the last thing I hadn't legalized through those two diets. And so then somehow I like learned about the like high carb, low fat vegan. So I was like, I'll merge that with paleo. And paleo is all about like high fat. So then all of a sudden I was eating like lots of carbs, lots of fat. And I was like, oh, wait, if I put all these diets together, I'm eating everything. And so it just like, isn't that so goofy? And like, so that's like is how I would do it. But yeah, it was really true. I had to like, because this is the thing, like there's truth to every single diet when they say that, you know, there are the foods that you can eat, like they'll tell you why they're good, basically. And, you know, and there's something to tell you that every food is good and every food is bad. So when I just took all the parts that they said you could eat from every single diet, eventually, like, I was mentally okay. I had, like, rationale behind legalizing everything. And, like, then I could intuitively eat. Isn't that goofy?
That's so interesting. Yeah, that is totally goofy. It's like you came in through the back door of intuitive eating.
Like, I did dieting so wrong that I was like, oh, I'm intuitively eating now.
But also kind of interesting that, like, I mean, it almost seems like your intuition was secretly at work because, you know, like you were sort of figuring out reasons to justify why, like, it was okay to take a part of this diet and a part of that diet. And, like, you know, it certainly wasn't like a purist form of each of those diets. It was like you sort of had an intuitive sense of like, well, I should be eating this and I should be eating that. And then suddenly everything was acceptable and you were like, oh, right. So.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I like, you know, that's what I am on my soapbox preaching now to people whenever they ask me like a food related, diet related question. I say that like I'm on the Katie diet now, you know, and, like we should all like craft your own diet of like what works for you. Like, you know what foods make you feel good and which ones make you feel bad, and you might not know because you haven't been doing that for a while, so you have to figure that out. But I think we should all really craft our own like what works for us, and it's going to be different every day.
Yeah.
And just like be aware of that.
And I think it's worth saying too that like when you're in an eating disorder or when you're actively trying to restrict yourself or change your body, like you're really out of touch with what actually makes you feel good and bad. So you probably won't know. Like, you know, because I mean, in my own experience, like with the gluten thing, I was convinced like, oh, it makes me feel bad. I can tell. I mean, I was never fully sure, but I was like, I think I get more constipated when I eat gluten, and I think I'm getting like gassier and like this and that. But it's so hard to be scientific on yourself no matter what. And then especially when you're, you know, trying to have your cake and eat it too, like you said. Like, so.
And I mean, and, you know, take what you will with this. I believe that if you think it's going to make you feel sick, it's going to make you feel sick.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I know there's a huge placebo effect with food.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other way too, like if you think that you're going to eat this and you're going to feel fine, like you will, and you'll be fine and you'll feel fine. And the more you just think about stuff in general, whether it's food or like a relationship thing or like a friend thing or a work thing, like the worse it gets, I swear.
Yeah.
Like, you have to just like stop stewing on things. And, you know, I'm like trying to tell myself this all the time because I'm a like thinker and stewer, and I'll just like think about things and think about things and think about things.
Oh, totally.
Until they get worse in my mind.
Right. And sometimes like the way out is stopping thinking about them so much. Like you can't think your way into solving them.
It's the only way out. Yeah. See, okay, so this is just so much fun. And I was thinking about this like when you were talking about the plane ride and Pete Holmes, who we're going to just like keep name dropping like until he comes on our podcast because we're obsessed with him. But he says this, that like doing the podcast is it's kind of like being on an airplane where you have to turn off your phone and just be really present with someone. And we're over Skype right now, if people couldn't tell already, but it's like we're not. Like I've been forgetting we're recording this entire time, to be honest with you. But it is so nice because, you know, doing a podcast and actually pressing record, it kind of forces us to be really present with each other for, you know, however long we go, where we're not checking our phones, we're not doing other stuff. And I don't know, I just love podcasts, and I'm just so grateful for podcasts, and like it helped me to meet you. They just,
Yeah.
I don't know, I text you all the time about the Pete Holmes podcast and about like, oh my God, because you really turned me on to that. And then I've become obsessed like all summer. I went back and listened to like, I still have more to go because there's so many, but
I totally went through all the archives too when I first started listening.
oh my
I was like,
gosh,
I can't stop.
it's amazing, and it's
It's
just
amazing.
it's so cool because I'll sometimes be listening to someone who like I wasn't very thrilled about, or like I didn't know, and then even the beginning I was just kind of like, I'm not really into it, and then they'll just be like this gem of wisdom somewhere in the like smack middle of like a 3-hour podcast that I'll just, and not even just with the Pete Holmes show, with any podcast that I happen to like have on, and I'm just like, this is why I turned this on, to like get this 10-second nugget of wisdom. And
Right.
I don't know, they're just so great, and I love recording them. I love listening to them. I'm just so grateful for them. They're just great.
Yeah. I feel like it's such a unique medium because it's like you basically get to eavesdrop on other people's conversations.
Yeah.
And like there's this way that, I mean, obviously like you still know in the back of your mind that it's recording, but like there's a way that people just sort of forget and just speak more freely than they would like in a radio setting or on TV or video. And I think too, like even just not having to think about your appearance and how your body looks when you're doing it, like makes it so much more liberating.
Yeah, I was actually, somebody had me on their podcast right before this, and she used this thing called Zoom. Anyways, have you had to use that?
It's like the recorder that kind of sits on the table, right? Like,
yeah, I don't know what it was. It was on video though, and I was like, oh, okay, like you're doing a video then. She's like, no, it's a podcast. I just really like us to be able to see each other while we talk. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And it's interesting, and I think a lot of like our favorite podcasts that we listen to, like Pete Holmes and Mark Maron, and a lot of them do it in person.
Right.
So, and you used to do your show completely in person.
I did. Yeah. It's only been the last season that I've done a lot on Skype, but I mean, I still try whenever possible. I always, anytime I'm emailing someone to come on the show, I'm like, if you happen to be in Brooklyn, like, come on over.
Yeah.
But because I do prefer it in person, I feel like there is that extra layer of connection that you get when you meet someone in person, and especially if it's someone you don't know. Yeah. And I feel like actually the fact that we did ours in person and like you came to my house, like the first time we met, it just helped sort of cement the friendship in a way that maybe it wouldn't have if we had just done it over Skype, you know?
Yeah, I was thinking about that today actually. Like, it's so fun. I mean, I guess you had done it like a bunch of times, but it is kind of funny that like I'd never met you, and then I just was like, yeah, I'm in New York.
Here, I'm in your house.
All of a sudden I was there. Hi. Like, it was just so funny. And now we're like really close friends, and like I consider you one of like my closest friends, even though like I don't get to see you that often.
Right.
But like that was how we met, of just like I just knocked on the door and I was there, and like, oh my gosh, hi. Like,
I know,
it's
it's
such
crazy.
A goofy thing. But I'm not even like, I don't know, I'm not online dating, but I feel like I've been online dating friends for a really long time now, and doing a great job with it, because I've met like most of my best friends in like the online world business wise, and then they've just become like best friends all through like my podcast, or they listen to my podcast, or I met them through their podcasts, and it's been amazing. And then then I go visit them, and they become my like real life friends, and I'm so grateful for it. But there's always that moment of like when I'm meeting them for the first time, and you've had this with like a bunch of people too, where you've like become friends with them online, and you've emailed lots, and you've texted, and then you see them in person for the first time, and it's like, hi, oh my gosh, like I know you so well, but I've never met you in person. And it's like, that's what, it's crazy, but
it is kind of similar to online dating, definitely.
Yeah, it is. It's I don't know. It's cool. I'm grateful for it, but
totally.
I'm really glad this platform exists. So I think we might have talked about this before, but I forget, so I'm sure other people have forgotten. I want to know two things. I want to know, what was the first podcast you ever listened to, and if you remember like finding podcasts, and like who introduced you to podcasts, all of that. And then I want to know like when you were like, I think I'll start Food Psych, and take us through all of that, because I'm curious.
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually was thinking about this recently because I just launched a premium membership, and I was writing a little page for it. We'll definitely talk about that. Yeah. I was writing a little history of food psych for that. But so it kind of, so I, podcasting has kind of come in waves. I feel like the first wave of it was like around 2005 or
Oh my
something,
gosh, that's so long
really
ago.
early. Yeah. And it was, I remember at the time, it was like a lot of big media outlets were doing podcasts. I think the New York Times was doing one, NPR had like done a few, I
So
think.
that was
There's,
long before iPhone. So this is just on the computer.
yeah, it was on the computer. It was actually on the computer and I think on iPods. I think you could get them on your iPod because I remember like something about that, but you had to download them. So it was like an MP3 download that you would like
Weird.
could put on your iPod. So I listened to a few of them at that time. I listened there like Slate, I think, had a couple. I
Wow,
can't
you are
even
such an
remember like
early adopter.
I was, although it's interesting because I was like an early adopter. I kind of checked it out and then I was like, meh. Like I just
I'm
didn't
not into
really
this.
really connect with anything much,
Well, it seems like kind of a hassle to like when you put something on your like
right.
I don't even really remember an iPod that much, but like I
Mm.
remember you had to like plug it in and download
Mhm.
and it's like so
Took
if it's yeah, so if
forever.
it's like music, it's like, oh, I know I like that, whatever, like I'll put that on
Right.
there. But like when it's something that it's not like you're gonna repeat listen to podcasts really.
Right.
So to like take up that time and the space,
Hmm.
anyways, so
Yeah, exactly. I guess, yeah, maybe that's why, or part of why I was just kind of like, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore
yeah, it's
because
definitely
it was
not
just
as
like
easy
too
as
much of
on
a
your
hassle.
phone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, and also I think at the time, I mean, maybe it was out there. I do know that there were a few podcasts going, like there's this one called Keith and the Girl that started in like 2004, 2003, I think. That's super fun. And like, it's a comedy podcast. It's become it's so long running now that they have this whole like world of the podcast that I feel like a little excluded by. So I kind of stopped listening to it because I feel like it's very like inside baseball for
Yeah.
their podcast world. But it's like amazing and so well produced, and the people are so funny, and they're comedians who produce it. So it was kind of like the first ever comedy podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so I don't think I discovered that until like my next round of dabbling and listening to podcasts, but I came back to it in like maybe 2011 or 2012 when an ex-boyfriend of mine discovered Mark Maron, and he discovered Comedy Bang Bang and like a few other comedy podcasts, and introduced me to them, and I was like obsessed.
Yeah.
So Mark Maron and Comedy Bang Bang were kind of the two first ones that I downloaded and kept coming back to. And Mark Maron in particular, I think just really resonated with me because at the time I was like in like the final stages of my recovery. Like I had stopped really using any behaviors, but I was still like didn't like my body and had a lot of shame just about like everything. I feel like I hadn't really explored, like I didn't even have a concept of the fact that I was ashamed of certain things about myself. It was just like shame was this like wash, like this like water that I swam in all the time. And so I feel like listening to Mark Maron
Wow,
actually
you
kind of,
said that so beautifully.
thanks. Yeah, it just was so like, not, I had never really considered it. And I was in therapy. I'd been in therapy for years, but like I don't think my therapist had ever like, used particularly that word, or if it had like just not resonated with me at the time or whatever, I don't know. But it was sort of like, I just was, stewing in this stuff all the time about like self-loathing, but not really seeing it for what it was. And so when I heard Mark Maron's podcast, he is like, such a master of like, self-reflection and just like presence of mind about his own shame and his own weird
Yeah.
habits, and
Really self-aware and like
super, yeah,
vulnerable with what he shares.
yeah, very vulnerable. And like it can go either way, because sometimes it's like so vulnerable that I'm like, oh, I wouldn't want to be him, I wouldn't want to be that open,
Mm-hmm.
but it helped me so much. It was so healing to hear him share all this stuff about his shame and his recovery from alcoholism and drug abuse. And, I think his being in the 12-step movement kind of like also gave him that language maybe, or helped shape like how he talked about those things. And so suddenly I was like, oh, so interesting. Like he has gone through a lot of the same stuff emotionally that I have, even if it was about different things. His was about drug abuse and, you know, alcoholism, mine was about food and codependency, but like it was very similar kind of emotions that he was describing. So, and then like his guests too, like a lot of, he's such a good interviewer and he's able to draw guests out like in this way that, they will share that stuff about themselves and be really vulnerable too. So I just started hearing all these different people like sharing these very vulnerable things about themselves and talking about what they were ashamed of or, choices they'd made in their past that they moved past or regretted or whatever. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not alone. I'm not crazy. Like there isn't something dreadfully, horribly wrong with me. And it was so bizarre that it took that to get that through to me because, my therapist had been basically telling me that for years. Other people had told me that in various ways. But like, I don't think I really connected with it until I did my own research, I guess, because it was really like research, just like listening to all these different people share these things about themselves. And maybe I reached a critical mass where I was like, okay, if this many people express these kinds of feelings, I'm not
weird.
Crazy. Yeah.
That exactly 100% mirrors like my obsession with the Pete Holmes podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And like it's the exact same thing. Like I feel like I'm learning about myself and about my relationship with food and sex and like career and all of these things through listening to other people's experiences with them, from podcasts and
totally.
Just like growing up, because I think I'm in this, your 20s is like the second adolescence, like no one tells you about, and you're just trying to like navigate through it and like it's like a time of identity. And I think like hearing about other people like figuring out who they are really helps you. And so I love that.
Yeah.
So you're listening to the Mark Maron podcast a lot. And so then where are you? And you said you were like at kind of the end of your recovery. So you're in school right now.
Right, exactly. I was in school and then I started working for the city Department of Health doing like a nutrition policy job, which involved a lot of like desk work and a lot of, spreadsheets and numbers and like analyzing menus and making recommendations. And so, there was a lot of like just number crunching, which interestingly didn't really trigger me at the time. But it's funny to look back on that and be like, wow, that is something that like 5 years before would have been so triggering.
Yeah.
But so I was doing a lot of this stuff that was very like mathy, and the part of my brain that wanted some like emotional connection was feeling very starved. So I was just like, and also we worked in this crazy office where it was like just this massive open space with cubicles, but you didn't even have like the cubicle came up to like your shoulder. So you could like really see everybody and like hear conversations, and it was very distracting to me. So I just listened to podcasts. It was totally like a newsroom. Yeah. So I'd listen to podcasts all day long just to like drown out the noise and help me concentrate. And so I just, I was like listening to a lot of Mark Maron. That's around when I discovered Pete Holmes too. Like an improv teacher actually turned me on to him because she was like, listening to him is like a really great way to just understand how to talk about comedy and how to like be a person, She was like just so into that podcast, and it really helped me. I connected with it right away too. So, that also kind of continued this thing of like vulnerability and being okay with, things that I had thought were shameful before. So I was listening to those. I was listening to like Keith and the Girl. I started getting into then, still like Comedy Bang Bang. What else did I listen to? I didn't get into Professor Blastoff until later, but that was like another influential one to me. A little later on. My therapist actually turned me on to that. And then like Slate's podcast, the Double X Gab Fest, I really loved. So I was kind of like really steeped in comedy podcast. Oh, The Nerdist, also really good one. So I was like listening to podcasts all day long.
Now entering nerdist.com.
Ah, yes. Oh my God. And Pete Holmes, I think, is on the Nerdist network too.
You made it weird.
You made it weird.
Oh yeah.
Oh, so good.
I always sing in my head the theme songs. Like I like when I think of you, I'm just like easy, little gums bleeding, crying to the evening, and I have everybody's jingles like in my mind.
Oh, I love that. It's so fun.
I love that. And then like you're so cute with it too, Christy. Like sometimes at the end you're like, love that song. Like it's so cute. Whenever you say that, I'm just like, oh, I love her. like my favorite thing.
Thank you. Yeah, I've gone through like moments with that song where I'm like, this is the best. And then sometimes people will be like, I hate that song. Like, I think I have a couple iTunes reviews where they're like, lose the song.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, never.
I'm like,
Never.
screw you. But then, I was like, maybe should I change the song? But
No,
it's so
never.
a part of the fabric of my podcast
Speaking as
now.
your biggest fan, I won't allow it.
Thank you. I
No, it's
appreciate
so good.
that reinforcement.
So,
Yeah.
okay, so you're listening to all these podcasts, you're working this desk job, you're starved for connection.
Mm.
So then you're like, I think I'll start a podcast about food and psychology.
Yeah, because I was like, working in this policy job, and I wasn't doing any individual nutrition counseling, and I just think I missed out on that sort of one-on-one, like talking to people. And I was actually in the process of getting my license, my registered dietitian's license, to be able to do the one-on-one counseling, and I knew that like that was down the road. I wanted to be doing that, so I guess I don't know. It wasn't really a career move necessarily. It was just kind of like a creative move and something I wanted to do. But looking back on it, I feel like it set the stage so nicely for that next phase of like going into working more one-on-one with clients and like, the sort of next step of my career, like specializing in eating disorders. So, but yeah, at the time I was just like creatively, I was starved for like human connection and creativity. Cause I feel like I mean, the people I worked with are great. I didn't lack for human connection in that way, but I feel like there wasn't like that deep sense of like, there's something so deep about podcasts. I mean, people talk about the most like shameful or deep or, profound experiences they've had. And like, so that was really resonating with me, and comedy and creativity. And, I wasn't doing as much journalism at the time. Had a couple freelance gigs, but I wasn't like writing very frequently. So I think that like the creative energy was something that was missing. So I was just like, you know what? I'm going to start a podcast. That was just, light bulb moment. I was like, I'm going to start a podcast. Think I want it to be something about like people's relationships to food and like what food means to us, how food connects people. Like I had this sense that like that was the thing that was missing for me in my job and in my life at the time. And that's what I wanted to do with the podcast. So I literally like made a bunch of index cards with different words relating to food and like relationship to food and psychology or whatever. And I just like made all these index cards and like picked one up and picked another up and put them together. I was, doing that for a while until I was like, food, psych, food, psych, boom, that's it. And that's how I got the name. And then from there, it was pretty easy, like to make it happen. I felt like I knew a lot of people already who I could talk to. And, there was definitely a learning curve on the technology, but I spent like maybe 6 months recording episodes, getting ready, getting like a big backlog, so I could launch with a little more comfort of like knowing I had stuff in the can. But it's interesting because, when I was recording those episodes, it was like from like April to April of 2013, it was like April to to August, basically. And it's funny because I didn't know about yours until way later.
No, I was thinking about how I connected with you because of Heather Rampolla. We were both on her show.
Yeah.
And I was like going to be on hers, and I listened to the week of the person before me, and I was like, I just need to see what like she's like, whatever. I was like, who is this person? And then I listened to you, and I was like, oh my God, she's so cool. And then I listened to all of yours, and I was coming to New York like soon after that. So
it's so funny how everything lined up. Like,
yeah, it was.
Yeah,
so cool.
That timing is so interesting.
Yeah. So,
but
so
yeah, I know. So yeah, so I just kind of like, it's interesting when I'm thinking back on it now because I'm in the process of putting those early archives like behind a paywall. Cause it's like, I don't know if it's shame in a bad way or wanting to have boundaries. So I've been kind of struggling.
I feel the same way.
Yeah. And boundaries, I've been thinking so much about boundaries lately. They've been coming up like in my private practice work with clients. They've been coming up with a podcast. They're just like everywhere. So
really?
Yeah.
Like your personal stuff to share, you mean?
Yeah, because it's like, I mean, I think the sort of the work that I do like one-on-one with clients, especially if it's people who are in like a severe eating disorder, can be helped or hindered by what I've shared before. And it's so like
Oh, yeah.
constant.
And you did share a
And
ton about yourself
I did. I
in
was so
those.
open. And I
Yeah.
felt like the openness of other people on podcasts, especially comedy podcasts, like comedians have no filter. That's kind of how they're wired or how they're encouraged to be in their profession. So I was like, that was the influence I was coming out of, was this like crazy
And I
openness.
loved that though. Like I
Yeah.
think I don't know. I don't want you to. I mean, I know they're not going to go anywhere. They're going to be
Mm-hmm.
paid, but I love that in comedy podcasts. Obviously, you
Yeah.
did, and that you were. I see. This is what I think we do until we kind of find our own way. Is we just emulate other people. Well, they talk about that a ton. Pete Holmes talks about that a ton in comedy, like how he couldn't
Right.
listen to that one guy anymore because
Right.
he was like using his line, or he would like be like him, and I went through a
Yeah.
phase with that with like a lot of different people, and so I think that's kind of probably partly what happened. You were kind of emulating some of the comedy podcasts that you loved, but I don't know. I love to know, like, I'm nosy, I guess. I like to know.
Right.
I think we all are as
too.
humans. Like, we all
Yeah.
like to know, like, the intimate details about people's lives. And
I know. And it's like such a double-edged sword. So I've been trying to figure out, and with this, like writing this personal essay too, because it was my first like real personal essay, that wasn't, just like for my own purposes or for a school application or something like that. Because I've always just reported and maybe thrown in an aside about myself now and then, but like real first person stuff is not something I've done a lot of. So this was like, thinking about the boundaries there too. Like, how much of my story do I want to share? What could be potentially triggering to people? I'm always thinking now about like what's going to be triggering, or what could, putting myself kind of back in the mind of someone who's really sick. Like, what are they going to like attach to and use for evil instead of good,
Yeah.
And it sucks to have to think that way. And I do kind of miss the openness of the original episodes, but I'm trying to come to a new sort of level of boundaries. And I've been thinking about it like selectively permeable membranes, which are like, every cell in your body has like a selectively permeable membrane where it lets in certain things and keeps out others. And I feel like that's kind of a good metaphor for like how I have to be in my career maybe, and how I need to, how I want to be as a human as well. It's like have the boundaries I need to protect myself, because it can be also very like emotionally draining and taxing to be too open. I've found that like the more I give, sometimes I want to and I just don't even think twice about it, and I just like give a lot and I'm super open, but then I feel like completely depleted by it. Or, in rare cases, like someone will use that like to manipulate me, and it's like, ugh, I hate that. I don't like how I feel after I've let that happen. So I've just tried to be a little more aware recently of like how I present myself in the podcast without like, making things less, like I don't want to make anything stilted or be less conversational or less open, but just, I guess, less open about like the gory details maybe.
Well, and maybe just, I mean, what I'm noticing in your podcast, having listened to all the archives and then being with it all of this season and now, and being your fangirl and all, I think that what you're doing now is you're making it more about the guest and their vulnerability and their story, but you're still interjecting and agreeing and sharing bits of yourself within that. And that's what you were doing before, but I think it was even more about you, because I think your guests maybe didn't have things to share, but like you were almost like coaching and relating to them, whereas now you're just like listening and then, relating or not, or reacting, so it's just different.
That's interesting.
And I feel the same way. Like when I started my podcast, it was, and it is now still, it's not like really, a business or anything, but it's just like a creative thing. And it's just a way to like express myself, but I feel the exact same way about the archives now. Like I was having someone, on the podcast, you know how you like when someone's going to come on, you send them like, here's the link to listen if you want to, whatever. And I was like, God, please don't listen to any of the old ones, because my old ones are, you know, I thought I was like, you know, the best thing since sliced bread when I was doing them. But I was still really freaking disordered, you know?
Right.
And I was like asking I would have all these health coaches on and ask them questions like, well, what do you do that before you eat breakfast or after you eat breakfast? And then what do you eat later? And then and like all these questions that now if anyone asks me anything about like what I eat or what, like, I'm just like, oh, please. No. Like, yeah. You know, and I just like divert. And I was that person, you know, like I was literally that person on the air, and people loved it because they were equally as disordered as I was.
Right.
You know? So I think like, oh, good. You asked the question that I was wondering. How many chia seeds does she eat? Hard-hitting journalism, you know?
Right.
Like, it's just crazy. So I like cringe looking back on that. But I'm really glad that like those also equally as crazy around food people with me back then have now gone on this journey with me, and hopefully are becoming more sane as I do, and having like the conversation we're having now 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, the me of then would have been like, oh my gosh, can't she just ask Christy about nutrition? Like, what are they talking about comedy for? And I would have, it's so funny, even like the podcasts that I've like listened to in my life really go to show like where I was. Because at first, the first couple of podcasts I listened to were all about like health and wellness and like superfoods and all totally that. And then it was all about spirituality, and it was like so much about spirituality and personal development and personal growth because I just transferred addictions, you know?
Right.
And then it was all about business and like online marketing, and I was like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur and entrepreneurship, and it was like all about that. And then now it's like comedy. So I'm either like about to be a comedian, or I'm just completely eased up and I'm just about having fun and listening to like whatever I feel like listening to, you know?
Yeah.
So what podcast I'm listening to really goes to show like how healed I am, or like what I'm into.
That's really interesting.
That
it's funny because I feel like I've had like the opposite trajectory almost. Like when I was first listening to podcasts, I didn't want anything that was like health related or nutrition related or, you know, whatever. It was like just all comedy all the time, basically. And a few, you know, a little bit of politics and a little bit of like feminism sprinkled in. And then now I've actually started listening to, like, I mean, I listen to yours, I listen to Kyla Prinz, which, you know, you guys both also kind of have gone on the same journey with me. We're all like moving towards, you know, health at every size and recovery and all that stuff. But, you know, I resisted listening to like other podcasts in the same space for a while, A, because I didn't really want to be influenced, and B, because I was like, I have enough of this in my life, you know? But now I feel like I'm curious and I'm interested, and maybe I have enough boundaries to not be influenced or something. So, you know, now I'm listening to that, and I'm listening to, like, you turned me on actually to the Wellpreneur podcast with Amanda Cook, and I love her. I feel like she's actually the vocal doppelganger of someone on the Slate XX Gabfest who I love.
Really?
Malone. Yeah.
Vocal doppelganger.
She's totally the vocal doppelganger. It's very weird. Every time I hear her, I'm like, is this Noreen?
That's so funny.
It's really
I always hate that, like when I was like a kid and I would call like landlines and they were vocal doppelgangers, and you're like, is this your mom or you? Like, you know?
It's true, because it like runs in families. Everybody says my mom and my sister and I sound alike too.
Yeah.
It's funny. But yeah, so, you know, now I'm like opening up to these other podcasts. And granted, I would never listen to like a paleo podcast or a, you know, maybe a more traditional wellness kind of podcast, but like these, you know, wellness oriented, health oriented podcasts in a similar space to me are super fascinating now. So, and in addition to Pete Holmes and Mark Maron and all the other good stuff, but.
Yeah, I feel like I can kind of having the name of my podcast, and I talked to you about this before, like with that mini series that I'm doing, Katie Wonders. Like I kind of want to drop the wellness and the land and just be Wonder Radio, you know, like. But I also like, this is the podcast that I have, and there's a lot of people listening to it, and it's whatever. And I'm obviously gonna like keep this as my umbrella. And it does work, because I think that wellness isn't just, obviously, I say this all the time, but it's not just about the food or movement or anything. It's about your relationships and your happiness and whatever. And
it's a much more holistic.
Yeah, and so like it works as an umbrella for all of those things. But I do think, since I have the word wellness right in the name there, it attracts a lot of people thinking that it's going to be, chia seeds and kale all day, and it's not. And I trick them, and then now they're listening.
Yeah.
So don't stop listening if you can't do the chia seeds and the kale. Keep listening.
I know, the gig is up.
Yeah, exactly. So
that's funny.
I don't know, but
yeah. I've thought a lot about that too, of like who's coming on this journey with us, like who did I get a whole new base of listeners when I switched gears, or did some of the same listeners like stick around and are kind of moving through this transition together? I definitely know some people who've stuck around and who seem to be benefiting from it. Yeah, exactly. But who knows, who else is come and gone or whatever. But it's like, I feel like I don't know, this goes back to, this is actually what I was trying to say before and forgot.
Okay.
But I feel like there's this like social justice element to health at every size and body positivity that is so compelling and feels so authentic to me, and like just kind of, I don't know, it feels like
activism.
This is a movement. Yeah, exactly. It feels like activism. It feels like this is a movement that like I have to be a part of, and I have like this, not an obligation in a sort of compulsory sense, but just like an internal obligation. Like I'm drawn to it, that this is something that I want to like spread the word about. And I think it's a social justice issue because, people, like large people, have been discriminated against, shamed, made to feel terrible about themselves like every day for their entire lives sometimes, and the sense of like being ashamed and feeling wrong and having people either tell you you're wrong or telling yourself that you're wrong in some way feels so resonant with me, because I've been there too, know?
Yeah. Okay. It's all coming together. You know how you were saying that we have connected on this, how we felt like we're like not the cool girls, but we're now we're the cool girls because we've decided to be,
Right.
It's that in the sense of we know what that's like to like feel excluded. Like I was always the kid like, oh, am I invited to the birthday party? Am I not? Like that kind of thing. And I think we want people to feel included, and this whole activism thing really resonates with us because like, okay, for me growing up, my mom and lots of my family members have always been heavy, right? And I feel like I just want to, not necessarily like my duty, but I don't know. I just really feel so fired up about fat politics, and I feel so wanting to like be on board with that. And of course, my journey with everything I've been through connects with that. And there's so much like internalized fat phobia that like I've had to deal with and move through and am moving through. And I think that is something that I'm obviously passionate about and want to continue talking about. But okay, this is about to get like real weird. We can just call this like you made it Wellness Wonderland weird. But
woohoo!
I had I don't know if you listened to this one, but that's many episodes ago, I had on an astrologer, Danielle Page.
I saw that. I didn't have a chance to listen. So
yeah, it's really old. Well, anyways, she's great. She's like so cool, and she did my chart for me before the episode, so I would like be able to ask your questions and whatever, understand. And it was really cool because she really like links your astrology chart together in a story about like what it all means, which is great because if you don't understand it and she just tells you like the planets and whatever, you'll just be like, what does this even mean? So it was really helpful, and I really enjoyed it. And one thing that she told me, and I think astrology is cool and fascinating, and I'm just like into that stuff. So like take what you will and leave the rest. And it's not really about like, oh, I'm a victim of the planets. It's about kind of like a personality test. Like it's not like, well, I'm an introvert, so I can never leave the home. It's like, well, just It's like, it's
Right.
about knowing yourself, whatever. So anyway, so she said this thing. She was like, you have the exact same, and this was like a year and a half ago. She was like, you have the exact same chart as Martin Luther King and who was it? And Gandhi, I think.
Ooh.
And I think Mother Teresa or something. Like, you have the same, like, something in your planet. She's like, these are all people who, like, start movements and are people who, like, are rebels and, like, something else. She definitely used the word rebel, definitely said, like, starting a movement and something like that. And so at the time I was just like, oh, that's funny, like, cool. and then I was kind of like, oh, maybe it's about like spreading like green smoothies for all or something, you know, like, because at the time I like was not even into where I am now with it. And then like it was just kind of in the back of my mind though, and then I got more into like health at every size and all this stigma around fat politics, and I was just like, wait, no, this is what I meant to share and do. And I felt like a lot of purpose around it, and I was just like, and at the same time, it's really weird, though, because I also felt like it was the thing I didn't want to share. I was like, oh, is this what I have to be the face of? And this is what I have to, like, this is what I'm going to share about? Like, I felt so, like, this, like, duty of, like, because I hadn't, like, shared about my eating disorder yet, and I hadn't even, like, come out of the closet on any of that yet. So it was, like, when I first, like, when I wrote, like, my first blog post about that and shared that for the first time, it was this feeling of, like, oh, I've got to do that, but I don't want to. And yeah, but I did it, and I've been like sharing about my feelings and all of my like emoting like online about it ever since, basically. And it's like served me well, pretty much. You know, I think it helps a lot of people not feel alone. And I think like if I, you know, when I was in that, saw someone else talk about their experience with it and getting to somewhat of the other side, but there is no other side, but at least like moving a little bit forward in it and still being the same person, still being okay, still being, and Isabel's talked about this before too. She's like, we only want to be thin because of what we think thin means. And if we can make people feel like they are able to do all of these amazing things regardless of size, you can, you know, have a great relationship or be an internet celebrity or be really happy with your life regardless of your size. You know, if I can like be an example for that and show that like even when I was at that weight and recovering from that weight and whatever, through it all, I'm the same person and I'm still like able to share and be authentic and be myself, because that's what I was afraid that I would lose when I gained the weight. And I talked about that in the essay. It was like not being confident enough to be myself because I felt like I couldn't do that unless I looked a certain way. And I think being myself, regardless of how I look and regardless of where I am, I think is, if I can see more people doing that, it's just like going back to like listening to the podcast. When we see other people emoting and being themselves, it makes you feel like you can do it too, you know?
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
I love that so much. I think it's like, it's such a helpful and healing step to be able to own that stuff and to be like, you know, even if you're not like 100% comfortable in your body, just doing it anyway and showing the world that you can and showing yourself that you can. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it's interesting too. I've talked with a number of clients about this, like clients who've, you know, been at a unhealthily low weight and climbed back to a place where they were able to stay and, you know, biologically appropriate weight. And like, you know, the behaviors of restricting their food or whatever were sort of on the way out, but the mindset was still really fixated and really disordered, you know? And I think
it's like the last thing to go.
It's the last thing to go, especially for body image. You know, it's like people can be doing the right stuff, you know, to nourish their bodies, but if they don't feel it's so frustrating that the body image stuff doesn't come first before all the other recovery. Because if it came first, it would be like, oh yeah, I can see how like my body's fine and I just need to take care of it and I need to be healthy. Like, you know, it doesn't quite work that way. But
well, I think the body image stuff is ongoing too, because your body's always changing, and especially during recovery. Like I would, every time I thought I mastered the body image stuff, I would gain more weight and my clothes would stop fitting, and I would have to be like, damn it, I just like that old one, and now I've got to do this again, you know?
I know. And it's so brave that you could keep going through that too. I think like just like being open about that and showing people that that is part of recovery is so healing too, because I definitely know clients who've, gotten to one point where they're like, okay, I guess I can kind of accept my body here. And then they gain more weight and they're like, ah, fuck it all, and they go back.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what I've done, and that's confused my body and my metabolism so much that I'm finally committing. And I think I talked to you about this like in an email after one of your episodes that like really hit me. But I would do this thing where like I would constantly, and I've never said this on the podcast, but I still haven't gotten my period back. And I would like go so hard with like, really doing well with not dieting and do great with it and intuitive eating and like really just like not thinking about food, not thinking about my body, doing great for a couple of months. And then I would gain the weight and none of my clothes would fit me. And I would be like, I'm going to try to be okay with it. But then just like you said, I would be like, I'd get scared and I'd go back to dieting. And then I would just like do it again. And because I'm really good at the discipline and the dieting, it comes very naturally to me. And so then I would do it. And so I think my body's just so confused. Like, is it a famine? Is it not? Like, is she going to starve us again? Or like, what's going on?
Right.
And so I think it's just going to take a lot of time to just prove like, no, like I'm cool. Like I'm going to stay on this path. And yeah,
definitely.
Like I was going to ask you about this actually, because the big one for me that I'm really proud of now is exercise, because I this summer did this thing where I just to get my period back, like completely stopped exercising completely. Like I didn't do yoga. I didn't like, I hardly, like I just really was like sedentary and, except like walking a little bit. And that was like really trippy for my mind to like be okay with, but I did it. And then now I'm like exercising again in this like totally new way. And it's just like, I'm not exercising for my body at all. I'm completely, and I know that like I would hear people say that all the time, like I'm doing it for my mind, and I'd be like, F you, like nice ass, like your arms are like so toned and like I didn't buy it. And I'm like not, like crazy exercising at all, but like I'm doing exercise in the morning when I have a lot of like shit to do, because it really does like make me, it like gets me up and moving, and then I can like get my stuff done for the day, and it like gives me the clarity. And like I never got that before, because exercise was always about something I had to do to make me feel better about my body, and like, okay, so there's this line, I wrote this down to ask you what you thought of this. There's this line in Marianne Williamson's book, A Return to Love, and she says, when I exercise, I actually think about my body less than when I don't. When I exercise, I stop thinking, preface this, it's not a body positive book, but this part of it at least. But then she says, when I don't exercise, I can't stop thinking about my waist and thighs. We take care of our body as a way to take care of the spirit. So, I mean, that is not a very like body positive statement, but I do feel that like when you are exercising, you can feel good mentally, and then that does make you feel better about your body, because you like did something good for your body. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you can sort of lay down some of the anxiety about your body, because it's like, I mean, also physiologically, it helps release anxiety. So maybe, if your selected thing to stew about when you're anxious is your body, reducing anxiety at the physiological level helps.
Yeah.
Whatever, no matter what.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's interesting, this relationship to exercise. That also, I mean, for me and some people I know, I think that's one of the last things to change too, because food sometimes can be like such a bigger, more obvious issue. But I mean, I don't know anyone who's grown up in our society not thinking about exercise as a way to manipulate their body. Like that, I mean, even before food became that, like to me, even before I knew about diets or had the concept that like you could manipulate your food to change your body in some way, I had the concept that like, if you do push-ups, you'll get big arm muscles, or if you do this, you'll get that. Like, it was like, it's so ingrained, the sense of like exercise changing your body, that I feel like it's really hard to start to relate to it differently. And I found that for myself, like I definitely am in a place now where I'll do it for its own sake. Like, I haven't moved today. I mean, today is a good example. I actually have not left my apartment. Like today's been a writing day. And on writing days, sometimes I just get really caught up and I don't leave the apartment. But I knew that.
Story of my life, like all winter.
Yeah. Yeah. It also feels kind of nice to be cozy when it's cold out, which it is here right now too. So, but I was like, I know I'm going to do a podcast and like I want to like open up my voice a little bit so I don't strain myself. And like, I want to just relax and sort of clear away the day. So I'm going to do some yoga. And I feel like I was like coming to my mat for like very wonderful, pure reasons,
Yeah.
But then even while I was practicing, like I hadn't practiced in like maybe a couple weeks because I was on vacation and just doing other things. And so it's the first kind of real yoga practice I've had in a couple weeks. And I was like, oh, wow, I feel like weaker than usual. And like for a second, my mind was like, what do my arms look like or whatever. And then I'm like, no, you know what? I don't care. I do feel a little less strong than usual because I haven't practiced regularly, but that's not a big deal. Like just, come back to it. But, those little flashes still come in and out sometimes where I'm like exercising and then I'm like, oh, what? Okay. Thank you for sharing, like moving on.
See, you sharing that, it's probably one of like what we were talking about before with your boundary things, but like it's so good for me to hear that, so that's why I feel like, I don't know, like I get what you're saying about the boundary thing, and especially with your clients, like that's complicated and I don't have the answer, but as like a connoisseur of your work and someone from your audience, like I'm your little focus group right now, it really is helpful to hear someone like I respect and admire has a moment like that, because I have them all the time and I shift out of them a lot quicker than I used to, but they still happen, and I think just knowing that we're not alone in that helps people so much, and having conversations like this,
Totally. I agree. I mean, and I think too, this is the kind of thing that I'm like with the boundaries, like comfortable sharing to a certain extent, like, I mean, because I feel like, I think if I had shared something like that a year ago, I would have felt vulnerable being like, oh, well, maybe my clients are now going to think I'm not recovered enough. I think I definitely had a moment of being like
professionalism.
Yeah, exactly. I have to put myself out there as recovered enough or professional or whatever.
Because then it's like do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the reality is like it's all so much more complicated than that. Nobody's ever going to have like pure body image all the time. I don't think I know anyone who doesn't, people without eating disorders included, who've never had an eating disorder or even disordered eating, like will still sometimes have a negative opinion about their body or feel like, oh, maybe I should change this or whatever. So I think it's kind of important to honor that, like, that's like the culture that we're all mired in, we're all part of this like just body negative culture, and we're probably going to have some body negative thoughts every so often, even when we're recovered, even when our body image is generally good.
Yes.
I have like, such powerful experiences for myself of like really honoring and really appreciating my body at this size and at its biologically appropriate weight and, what it can do and how it looks and everything. But like, I also sometimes have moments where I'm like, do I look fat in this? And it's like, oh God, who cares?
Right.
But that is
conditioned. It's like
conditioning.
Really deep in there. And then not only is it deep in there, like all day long, we're getting those messages from other people and it's crazy. And like, okay. Oh, I have so much that I wanted to add. This has gone by so fast. We're going to have to do the rest of like the non. I wanted this whole thing to be not food related, but then it like became this, which is like great and amazing. But we'll do those questions as like quick fire, like at the end. But okay, so quickly about this, I think that it goes back to like kind of what we were talking about that social movement where it's like this. We want to shift society, and that's why I think my astrologer, I'm being so weird about this, but I feel like when my astrologer said that, like, I really want to help shift society, so maybe the generation after us, maybe the cool thing online isn't, health and wellness in that sense. It's health and wellness in our sense, which is what we've been talking about this whole time, which is health at every size and all this body image stuff. And it helps it not be so ingrained for people growing up, and it's not coming at you all the time, because of course it's going to like keep coming up when we live in a society where it's everywhere. And like Melissa Favello, as she came on my podcast a couple like week ago or whatever, and she was saying to me that her whole thing is that like I asked this question, like, what are you struggling with right now? What are you like trying to improve about yourself? And she was like, I'm really, I want to do better with body image. She's like, I just really want to like my body more. And that could be very surprising to people, because she's like such a feminist hero, and she's such a body positive person online publicly. But to say that she still struggles with that all the time was really fascinating for me to hear, and so helpful for me to hear. And she was saying, that when I have a body image day, to not make it turn into a body image week or a body image month, because that's debilitating, and that's really not good. And that, I think, is when it can get scary, when it becomes like and I've been there where it's like a negative thing happens in my life, and then my default, like you were saying, my default like coping mechanism or go-to like way to beat myself up isn't like about anything other than my body and like my physical appearance. That's just where my mind goes, and then that can like make things worse and spiral. So
yeah, absolutely,
it's just crazy.
And I think it's kind of important as people working in this space too, to like model that, it's not perfection. Like you're not going to recover from an eating disorder and get cool with your body like 100% all of the time. Like recovery is imperfect and different for everyone. And there's going to be like little gray areas that we all have, or little blips or moments, like I think this is true for people who don't have eating disorders too, but just want to get cool with their body. Like I think it's just a practice, and maybe we're all doing this practice, and some people are just kind of doing it in a more positive, way that's helping them, and some people are practicing negative body image and reinforcing negative body image, and could use more practice in the other direction. So
yeah, and I think what really helps, and this is a great transition to my other things I was going to ask you, is to just like stop being around people who are also thinking about it all the time.
Yeah.
And talk about other things, and talk about like, instead of complimenting people on how they look. And this is what I was going to ask you about earlier from your last week's podcast, is you guys were saying, compliment people on other than things other than looks. And that is so hard for me. Like it's really easy for me to compliment people on things other than looks, but whenever I do see something that I like, I compliment them on that as well, because I'm just like a complimenter, like, oh my god, I like your hair, I like your dress, I like your
right.
And it's just like what I do, and like maybe it's like a girl thing, but that is a hard thing for me. And then you've talked about this a bit before, and we were kind of starting to talk about it when we were talking about like this becoming more trendy, and people who I was starting to say this before, people who were never into like health foods and wellness stuff are like getting into that now, and then they expect me and you, because of what we do online, and they don't really understand it or know, so they just expect us to be like they're gonna like talk about their diet with, and like get help with their diet about, and like, oh, look at, I'm doing this or that, and to politely like remove ourselves from those conversations is rough. And then also like feeling, you said this so, and I resonated with this so much, and I've heard that you talk about this on podcasts, of like when you as a young kid like discovered dieting, or no, when you were like older, I think in college. I'm such a stalker, I know like everything about your life. But when you were like became into like the dieting world, you were like, oh, this is what it's like to be a woman. Now you just talk about dieting and weight and Weight Watchers and blah blah blah, and like that's just like part of the dialect. And it's so true. Like this woman that I know, who's like an amazing person, she was saying once that she's a teacher, and all through Christmas time in the staff room, everyone's bringing in treats and whatnot, and they're constantly talking about their bodies like, oh, I was so bad, I was so bad, I was so all, like attaching all this morality to it. And she would just like not like be part of that. And then people were like, oh, you don't want to say that around her, you know? She kind of became this like pariah of, and so it's just like, oh, it's like you want to participate in society and like be part of it, but I also don't, because I don't want to like prolong it. So it's just this interesting thing I know we've both like struggled with.
Totally. Yeah. It's like we've felt like outsiders before and now we're feeling like outsiders again.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, it's sometimes painful in that way because I'm like, oh, this again, you know, like feeling sort of on the outskirts yet again. But I try to just, you know, surround myself with people who do think the same way and talk about things in the same way and, you know, not allow ourselves to descend into that. But it's tough. I think it's like a constant dance, and I'll be curious to see where we are in 10 years if like, you know, the thing we're into now is going to be the thing that everyone else is into then. And
I think so. I hope so.
I really hope so. Yeah.
I remember like one day this summer I called you and we were talking on the phone, and I was just like really down about the fact that where we want to be in 10 years isn't today, and just feeling like there's so, and I was just like, Christy, like, do you ever feel really sad about the fact that like all day long, like here we are, like Oprah's investing in Weight Watchers and there's like all of everything is like health and wellness and green juice and it's everywhere, and like just feeling really frustrated about this, like we have so far to go and like this society is so warped. Like sometimes I'm just like, are you kidding me? Like, is this, am I the only one that sees this? Like, am I the only one? Like, is this some, it's like a weird cult that like everyone is like a part of. And I'm just like, wait, you guys,
I know.
This is crazy.
Hello.
Dieting's like so weird though. Why are you doing that? You know? And I just got like really down about it. And you were like, you know what? Like, you just gave me really great advice. I don't really remember exactly what you said, but I just remember it made me feel a lot better.
Oh, thank you. I don't remember what it was either.
Basically, I think it was just like, just do what you can and like keep doing it and like be part of the solution and not the problem. And, you know.
Yeah.
Which is
hard.
That
sounds about right.
Yeah. Which is.
It is hard.
But I think that's like having support and having you in my life and a lot of other people and like having conversations like this and hopefully getting more people on board helps. It helps me feel better. Like writing about my experience actually is super cathartic for me. Like I wrote, this is the part that got cut out of that article, but I was saying that like not only am I nostalgic for that old body that I was in when I fit this societal norm, I'm nostalgic for being a part of this wellness movement that I was so a part of that I'm not anymore, you know. I'm part of a different movement and that's okay, but I'm not, you know, and like being okay with that. Sometimes I do want to go back and be like, oh yeah, but whatever. And and I don't think it's like so black and white. Like I still do enjoy, you know, healthy eating and foods some of the time. So it's not like a black and white thing, but I don't know, like, don't you have a t-shirt that says like kale and cupcakes or something?
Yes, I do.
Like
eat kale and cupcakes.
Yeah.
Totally.
So.
Yeah, because I mean, I love the taste of kale, genuinely. I'm like very excited when I see a good kale salad on the menu somewhere, but that doesn't mean
it's like always what I order.
Yeah, it's delicious, but you know, it's so tricky.
But we're not wrong if we have snacks on the airplane because
Exactly. Yeah, and snacks are part of a good balanced life. So enjoy them. Oh, there's so many more things we could talk about.
I know there's so many more things. So ideas. Okay, so this is good because we were saying that like when the body image stuff gets really like intense, then focus on other things. And I wanted to like ask you all about improv and acting and stuff, but I'll just ask you. I'm gonna just like go through all of these questions that I have that are really like not very quick fire, but we'll just see how this goes.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so we're having a dinner party, you and I, and you can invite 5 people. Who would you invite? What would you make? What would you cook? And what would you love someone to turn and ask you about? And what would you hope that someone doesn't ask you about?
Ooh, that's such a good question. Oh my God. Okay, Pete Holmes, of course.
Duh.
You, because you got to be there with Pete Holmes.
Amazing.
Or no, well, you're already there. Never mind. Okay, so 5 other people. My boyfriend, because I love him.
That'll be amazing. And we're going to get along great.
Oh, yes.
I've
I'm so
wanted
excited
to meet
to
him
meet
anyways, which I feel like I kind of have like on Skype.
I know you did. Yeah. And I'm like half expecting him to walk through the door and be like, are you still talking to Katie?
So I'll get to meet him in a moment. Okay.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Okay. So those are obvious ones. I love talking to Harriet Brown. I could talk to her forever. So I feel like I would invite her, the author of Body of Truth. And I just read her other memoir, Brave Girl Eating, about her daughter's recovery from anorexia. So I would definitely invite her.
She was on your podcast.
Yes. She was my guest last week, or who knows when this is recorded. But
we'll link to that episode.
Yes, that'd be awesome. I'm loving Aziz Ansari now.
Oh yeah, are you watching the Netflix show?
I am. I love it so much.
Okay, I'm gonna watch it like right after this. Is it really good?
It's so good. It's fantastic. So I would like to invite him and talk to him about the show. And I know he and Pete Holmes are friends, and they kind of came up together. So that would be fun. They would have
a good dynamic.
I always think at dinner parties about like who's gonna get along and like bring out the best in each other. So
yeah, totally.
Gosh, who else? Well, now I'm just thinking of comedians and like.
Well, I think we should have Pete bring his girlfriend Val, because guess what? I haven't told you this. She's coming on my podcast.
Oh my God! I actually just reached out to her to have her on mine too.
Oh my God, this is amazing!
That's amazing.
I was like about to text you like, this is not a drill. Val is coming on my podcast, and then I was like, I'll just tell her tonight, and I forgot until right now. So we should bring her. She's like real cool and does like a bunch of cool stuff. So I think she would, and that one like Pete would be happy that she was there and stuff.
Right, exactly. Yes, we need to have her for him and for us because she's awesome.
Yeah,
that's very cool.
All right, so that's a good amount of people. What would we eat?
So what would we eat? I mean, probably like kale and cupcakes or something along those lines. Like a nice fun protein, maybe a couple protein options for like vegetarians and non. A couple like colorful veggies, some delicious bread, some kind of like, I'm thinking maybe like Sullivan Street Bakery or some like a really nice like New York small bakery.
Oh, that would be good because like I'm from out of town and don't know them.
Right. You would do like, the kind of special bread.
A lot of LA people in town, so something very New York would be nice.
Totally, yeah. So very New York stuff. Maybe some like nice butter from the farmer's market.
I'm thinking family style, like just like lots of different dishes, lots of different vegetables, like every like fresh farmer's market-y stuff in the middle, and we just kind of like share and talk for hours.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm picturing like not necessarily board games after dinner, but I'm picturing like, did you ever play Mafia?
Oh, yes.
I'm picturing us playing that after dinner.
Is that the one where you put like the thing on your head? Like
No. You pass out cards, like a deck of cards, and if you get an ace, then you're the killer. And you wink at, you don't know who the killer is, and you just like wink at people, so it's really funny. And then they have to be like, I'm dead. I think that would be like really superb after dinner. Yeah.
That sounds perfect. And
okay, so what would you want someone to ask you about at the table, and what do you hope that they don't ask you about?
I would want someone to ask me about like my work, the work that I love, which is like, this is crazy. This is actually, I haven't even shared this on my podcast or really told many people at all, but I'm starting to work on a book proposal, and I want like, I don't know, I just want to put it out into the universe that I want a book deal, and I want people to like to me about my book deal and like talk to me about my book ideas. And it's very,
yes. That is the best news
stage
that I've ever heard in my life. I'm so happy about this.
Thank you. I'm so happy too. It's been years that I've like had a book idea. Actually, Food Psych was partly born out of a book idea I had before to write like a cultural history of emotional eating, which is like still kind of a cool idea, but I don't think really enough for a book necessarily. So I kind of like mine some of those ideas and turn them into Food Psych. But I think the book that I want to write, it might be a little self-helpy, but it might be personal too, and we'll see how it all shakes out.
I picture it with like stories of other people, even like intermixed and like just like pull quote things too, because you've had some. Oh, it's gonna be so good, whatever it is. I can't wait for it.
I'm so excited.
I know.
So
excited too.
Yeah,
you light up when you're talking about it, so it's.
Thank you. Yeah,
it's amazing.
I think that's why I want people to ask me about it, because especially like the people we have assembled at our dinner party, because they're fun to talk to, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And then what do I not want people to ask me about? I guess like anything to do with anything to do with like the
I know
food
what you're
on the
gonna say.
table and how good or bad it is for you.
Yeah, exactly. I knew you were gonna say something like that because
Yeah, like
it
just not have that be a
it's
part of
just boring. Like it's not
it.
when food isn't like your main concern and your body isn't your main concern. It's like it's really kind of boring, you
Yeah,
know? It's like
completely.
I realized like I was so into food and wellnessy stuff because I wasn't into anything else, you know?
Yeah,
And then I realized that like there's a lot of other things that are way more interesting, really.
totally. I know there's this whole amazing world out there. Food is so mundane. It's like it's really interesting that something so mundane has become so glorified, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, so like we won't have any food talk at the table other than to be like, "Oh, this is great. Pass me more of this," or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so that's
Okay, so next fun question.
hmm
You're trapped on an island. You can bring with you one person, one TV show to binge watch, one
mm
book that you wouldn't get sick of, and one food that you wouldn't get sick of.
Wow, this is a good question. Okay, this is so cheesy, but the person again, I'm gonna say my boyfriend.
Duh.
Duh, he's great. I never get sick of talking to him. A show that I would never get sick of watching. I mean, it's tough because I feel like there are shows that I love that I've watched all of that I know I would love to watch again, but then forever, I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's
So it's
really
like,
hard.
um, and then it's like there's shows that I'm in the middle of watching that I'm like, oh yeah, I want this. So maybe it's that. So it might be Aziz Ansari's show Master of None or Last Man on Earth, which I'm really loving.
What is that?
It's a is it a Hulu? I think it's a Hulu original series,
Oh, cool.
written by and starring Will Forte, with Kristen Shaw and January Jones and like a bunch of
Oh,
other
and it's
awesome
really
people.
good?
It's very good.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm
it's
gonna have to
funny
get
and
Hulu. I gotta get Hulu anyways because I need to watch the rest of the Mindy Project. So,
yes, that's another one that I would consider bringing with me
oh,
because
it's so
it's
good.
hilarious and delightful. Maybe Girls too. I feel
Yeah,
like
I know. Although, I mean, Girls
Girls.
isn't really a show that like. Of course, I'm gonna like watch every episode, but I've never like rewatched them because they're not like
Yeah, that's true.
they're really intense and like they make me feel a lot of feelings. So I just like I just don't want to
Right.
like go. It's not like
Relive
comfort
it.
food. Yeah, you know, it's
Right.
just kind of like okay, I watched it, I'm done, I experienced that. You know?
Right. That's true. I mean, I was thinking like Breaking Bad. I feel like the same way about like I probably won't go back,
Right.
excuse me, rewatch that, but
Yeah.
it's like one of the best shows of all time. I can very much recognize or like The Wire, it's like the same kind of thing.
Yeah, but yeah, for long term, you have to go with something like
Mhm.
comedy. I feel.
Yeah,
Um.
totally.
Okay, book.
That's a tough one because it's like, do you go fiction? Do you go nonfiction? I mean, if I'm stranded on an island,
I
do
would
I,
say fiction for sure.
right? Because do I even care about social
Right.
issues if I'm stranded on an island?
Exactly.
Uh, I Gosh, I actually like have not read a lot of fiction recently. I'm really
Or if
like,
there was like a guidebook of like how to get off a deserted island, that would
oh
be
yeah, that
convenient.
one I would bring. I also really loved Moby Dick when I read it, and like I feel like I read it a bunch of times for papers and just for fun and stuff. So maybe that,
Yeah,
because
that'd be
also it's
good.
pretty, it's a good theme with the desert island
Yeah,
stranding,
yeah, totally. It'd be
nautical.
like you'd feel like you're not alone.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, food that you wouldn't get sick of.
Oh, that's tough too. I mean, one thing that I always say is kind of my go-to like desert island style of food is Korean because I feel like there's so much interesting stuff going on that like I wouldn't get sick of it and it's got a lot like vegetables and delicious meats and like rice and fun things. But
I thought you were
some
gonna say something like super practical, like a like something that you would have like on a
a
deserted,
grilled
like a
cheese sandwich.
coconut or something. Like my
Oh,
go-to,
yes.
and then you're like Korean.
Yeah, so like a nice bibimbap,
Yeah,
which
that's convenient on
that's
the
convenient.
island.
Totally. In a stone bowl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, so funny. Um, okay, what advice would you give to your 25-year-old self?
Oh, that's so good. Um, like it's not that serious and like just your body is not the problem.
Oh
Your food
yeah.
is not the problem. Um, although it's interesting because I think about that
Then
now and
we
I'm like,
wouldn't be talking. if
Exactly.
you knew
Yeah.
that then.
Like if I hadn't gone through that, but I want to have saved myself from that. I feel bad for my past self having gone through that, but I also am like, it's made me who I am. So I don't know. I mean, maybe I would say like pay attention when your therapist is talking to you. Because I could have maybe learned some of that stuff earlier. I don't know.
Life is long.
Yeah, life is long. I know. I say that all the time, and then I'm always like, knock on wood, because you never know. But
No, I'm knocking on wood.
yeah.
What now I'm gonna do Pete's questions. What is the time you've laughed the hardest?
Oh, that's so good. I always think about that when I listen to his podcast.
I have mine for when I'm on his show.
Really?
Someday.
I want to hear yours too. I would say, I mean, it's like his guests are always like, I can't even really remember. And I think that's kind of how mine is too. Like, I don't even remember what was being said, but I just remember I was in like maybe sophomore year of high school in math class, maybe junior year.
I'm just laughing right now.
It's just ridiculous. I was with my friends Tara and Jessica, and like we just would always crack each other up. And we had this math teacher named Mr. Sheppy who was such a weirdo. Like he was delightful. He was like the only person in our high school who had a PhD. He was very brilliant, but he only teacher. I don't know about the students, but he like seemingly wore like foundation or maybe just had like kind of got like tan, like did like sunless tanner. I don't know. He was like a very interesting, weird human and so fun. And like we loved him and we loved kind of making fun of him, but he was a really good sport and he would like make fun of us back. So it was like something to do with that in math class. But like, I just remember like Tara and I just started cracking up and could not stop. Like, and Mr. Sheppy like stopped the class and was like, ladies, are you like, and he had this very just funny, dry way of talking that was like, you could see like the twinkle in his eye and that he was like kind of laughing with you, but he was like acting very stern. He was like, anytime now, ladies. We just like lost our shit. It was amazing.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. I had a math teacher once who in middle school who painted her nails every single day to match the outfit that she had. Like before nail art was a thing. Like she had these like super long nails, and so it would be like these intricate designs every day that like matched her dress.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's yours. Okay. What's your hardest laughing?
Mine. Oh, it's okay. Well, whatever. I'll just tell it. It's kind of long, but I'll tell it really quick. Basically, I was with like my friend's mom was taking us home. Maybe also high school, probably around sophomore, freshman year. Probably fresh. We couldn't drive, and my friend's mom, is taking us home. And there's this girl who we didn't like know very well, and she like needed a ride home or something. Now that I'm telling this, I'm like, this is not even going to be funny probably. But
no, but I feel like they all are.
I know. So anyway, so we're like, yeah, we'll take you home, whatever. And so she's in the car and she's like, we're like, okay, my friend's mom was like, okay, where do we go, honey? Is it like left or right? And she's like, shoo, I don't even know. I can't even tell you. And like the way she said that was just like that. And she kept saying it over and over again. Like, and she'd be like, okay, well, let's go right. Is it over here? She's like, shoo, I don't even know. I can't even tell you. And like she said the same thing over. And so then like it became later, way after that, it became like a joke with my friends and I. Like whenever like we didn't know, we'd be like, shoo, I don't even know. Like I can't even tell you where my pen is at. Like we just would like always say that, and it just became like this like really funny thing. Somehow she like found her house and we're able to take her home.
Oh my God.
It was just so funny. So now like whenever like I don't know an answer, I like in my mind, you have those like little jokes with yourself, and I'm like, shoot, I don't even know where I put my keys. Like, and I just like do this bit with myself. It's very funny.
So funny.
But
oh my God.
Anyways, yeah, maybe by the time I'm on the Pete Holmes show, I will have a different answer that something else super funny has happened. But right now, I'd probably say that because it was like still makes me laugh really hard.
I feel like they're kind of all when you're a kid too, right?
Yeah, or when you're younger.
Once people share, usually from that.
Yeah, I know. It's either that or like a mushroom trip.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because the other one I can think of is when I was really stoned and like I laughed nonstop. But yeah, I don't remember what about.
Yeah, it's like the same thing.
Oh, farts were involved, I think.
Actually. Oh, anytime where there's farts are involved.
It's always funny.
Oh, man. People just need to fart more just to laugh more.
Yeah, farts are always hilarious. I can't.
I have like 10 more questions right now that I want to ask you, and I'm just contemplating, like, I think I'll just save them because I know you're going to come back. Yeah. So I'm just going to save them because I can't even choose. But this was amazing, and I just love you so much. And thank you to everyone for listening this far. I told Christy, I was like, I want to do a Pete Holmes style podcast where we are recording for as long as it takes. And that's what we did today. So if you listened to this far, thank you. And wait, I should have you say, do you want to say keep it crispy? Keep it wonderful? I don't know.
Keep it wonderful. I will also say that one time on Pete Holmes' podcast, someone made a mistake and said, keep it Christy. And I was like,
okay, that's what we'll have you say.
On my mirror. I was like, keep it Christy. So yeah, keep it Christy and keep it wonderful.
Thanks for listening. You made it all the way to the end. I'll be back next week, but until then, let's stay inspired and keep this conversation going. So tweet at me at Katie Dalebout and our guest with your aha moments from this conversation. And like the Wellness Wonderland on Facebook, so we can all hang out there and discuss how inspired we are and how we'll apply it in our daily lives. And never miss another episode or post from me by signing up for email updates on thewellnesswonderland.com. See you back in Wonderland.